Think we can get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. I am Rishav. I'm an applied scientist here at Future AGI. Before this, I was working at Microsoft, working very closely with the co-pilot teams. Uh, So I've seen the LLM application space evolve very rapidly in the last couple of years. Earlier, we were still trying to use like ML models, which had like very rigid input and output. So very specific input would go in and very specific output would come out. But from that, we are now in the era of agentic systems where these agents are capable of taking certain actions for you and you're making multiple LLM calls to achieve a singular task. So it's a very interesting space because that increases a lot more complexity. So as we are seeing that the application space has evolved, but the infrastructure around how the LLMs are being inferenced has not evolved because it is still very difficult to go through different LLMs, different providers. You need to set that up manually. So that is something that we will be discussing today. And with me on call, we have Kartik. Uh, Kartik, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Kartik and I am an ML engineer working here at Future AGI. So, right, I have been collaborating with a lot of developers, especially in open source. And as Rishabh said, right, this is one of the infrastructure level problems that we have tried to solve. Since this webinar might bore some of you because this is not actually really flashy, but this is very important in the perspective of as a developer and as a person who ships products in the enterprises also. For example, cost tracking and etc. So I hope this webinar gives a lot of knowledge to everybody.
Okay, great. So let's dive in with that. Before getting into what we'll be discussing today, command setter, let me help you like understand the problem a little bit and why something like a command center might be useful for your LLM application. I speak to a lot of developers and a lot of like companies who are building out with Gen AI. They're starting to build out their products, or they have been, iterating it for some time. So one of the common questions that developers or product owners keep asking me is that the cost of inferring LLM has reduced quite a lot in the last year, but why are their application prices still going higher, right? So there is a considerable increase in the bills that these enterprises are now having to pay, even though the LLM inference cost has gone much lower. Now, there is a law which, says that once the commodity price goes down, it's not that your, costs are going to go lower as well. It's just that the usage of that commodity increases much more. So that is what is happening with the LLMs as well. The inference cost has reduced significantly, but now we are not frugal with the number of calls that we are trying to make to these LLMs because I know that at this point, most of us have like a paid version of some sort of, AI assistant, maybe like Claude Code or GPT or Gemini, right? And it has become much more accessible for people to, build out their applications using a platform like Bolt or Lovable, and they are trying out multiple LLMs. So there has been a lot more increase in the number of LLM calls that you're trying to make. Earlier, we were still trying to, make a singular LLM call with very short prompts because also the higher context windows were not supported. Now the context window is also much larger, and people are not frugal with the number of LLM calls they're making. To achieve a singular task, you make like 10 to 20 agentic calls to like different LLMs that all work in tandem to achieve a single goal, right? So that is where a lot of these costs have increased. Now, another area where a lot of these teams spend a lot of money is on experimentation because you're trying out different models and you're trying out different providers. There is something new coming out every day, and you want to, include all of this in your agentic application. So you're spending a lot on experimentation as well. And because there is not a consolidated view for you to see where you are spending more money, maybe one of the providers is where you are spending more money than the other, you do not get a clear understanding on, what are the cost versus accuracy trade-off over there for you. Right. So that is also one of the places where teams are having to spend a lot more money. Some of the famous, problems that had occurred in the last year was with this Echo Leak Microsoft 360 Copilot, where a researcher sent out a single email with some hidden prompt injection instructions, and the receiver did not even have to click a button on that email, but because they had their Copilot on, which read through that email, had that prompt injection, and it could leak all the OneDrive data that was there, or share or details about certain SharePoint, and Teams were also exposed. Right. Another such case happened with Perplexity Comet, where the user hid a prompt injection attempt within like a Reddit comment, and within a few seconds, the attacker could get access to the user's email and could bypass captures, and all the credentials were sent to the attacker. And similarly, ServiceNow had built an AI agentic system where, a higher authority agent could leak out certain information to a lower authority agent because the communication between these two agents did not go well, and then that agent had access to certain information that it shouldn't have had access to, right? So, in all of this context, the OWASP reported that prompt injection is one of the highest risk that the LLM applications are currently facing, and 73% of the production deployments that are out there are currently facing these problems. And only a few enterprises, bigger companies like Microsoft, because they have to be very careful about what is going out to their user because the costs are very high, they are trying to deploy certain defense systems to prevent such things from happening, right? But why are these things happening is because there is a lack of guardrails in how you are using your LLM applications. So currently, there are like certain external guardrail systems that are put over your LLM application, right? And sometimes they do not work very well in tandem. Maybe your guardrail models are failing, they are not able to detect certain in attacks, or maybe they are taking a lot of time in coming up with a response, and it bypasses in that duration, and the prompt injection attempt or any other vulnerabilities are exposed. Also, there is no observability implemented, so you also do not get a sense of how the flows are happening between different agents, and there are no checks at agent level to see how the data is flowing from one agent to the other. Now, bear with me on this slide because this has some of the problems that I have faced while being an AI developer. Firstly, if you have built anything, any complex application with LLMs, there is the fallback nightmare, right? Because any providers can decide to give up at any point of time, and for you as an engineer, you need to have all those fallbacks in place. So if your OpenAI model is failing, you need to have a Gemini model in place. You need to have like a different, provider in place. You need to have like multiple layers of models over there, so that because these models can fail at any time, you do not want your end level application to be failing. So you implement a lot of these fallbacks manually, and it becomes a nightmare to manage between different providers and different models that are there. Also, you do not want to make your system very specific to a particular provider or a particular vendor, because there are so many models coming out every day. Different, competitors like Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're coming out with new models, and you do not want to tune your system so much that they can work with only one provider. You want to have quick switch-ins in place so that you can, keep experimenting with new models, such that you can easily swap these models when you want them to be in production. Right. And as I already said, that when you're using multiple providers, especially for fallbacks, it becomes really difficult to track between which request is going to like which provider or which model. So you have your application in production, but maybe the main LLM is failing, so it went to some other provider and some other model, and that model is giving a completely wrong answer, but you had never expected your request to go to that model in the first place. Now, how do you even debug this, that it was this particular fallback model that failed for this particular request, right? It is almost impossible to do that. So that becomes very frustrating for the developer as well. Karthik, do you want to add anything to this from your personal experience? What other problems have you faced?
Yeah, right. First of all, honestly, implementing the whole fallback is a very painful situation, right? Like you can't just hard code five, six models and pray that one of them will work. This will just add latency, first of all. Secondly, you don't know what kind of model quality works with your prompts, right? It's basically weeks of experiment that you get comfortable with your prompt template, and secondly your let's say agent workflow, and third is the base LLM that you are going to use. So I can't just add right like a Claude model and Anthropic model for something I have designed for a Gemini model, right? So implementation itself is a nightmare. That's why other solutions have been preferred in the industry these days.
Now, we come to the security reality. So, firstly, like a lot of developers who are building, these LLM applications very quickly, they often store these API keys for different providers, so many different models. Sometimes they are stored in text. So, if you go on GitHub and just type out OpenAI key for public repos, a lot of these repos will come up because they have committed their API key by mistake, because often these API keys are also embedded in the code and you don't really have a check for that as well. Right. And then if you're using certain, SDK based implementations like LiteLLM, some of us might know that there was a vulnerability exposed in the LiteLLM SDK as well because of a bad merge that was made in the code. So anyone who was using that particular, library, their credentials also got exposed. And then finally, because even in our organization, the keys are shared between like different teams, because the business teams are building certain demos. There are certain other people trying to experiment. The engineers are experimenting with certain things, so the keys are shared all across, and there is no like a and the rotation that happens is very manual, because at some point you will notice that the usage has shot up. So the developer decides that, okay, I need to kill this key and come up with a new key. And then that is followed by like days of pings where people are asking, hey, can you share me the new key? And then they get access to that model as well. So that also becomes a really frustrating experience for the developer. Coming to the technical aspect, with the complex agentic systems that we are now trying to build, and also the prompt sizes have increased significantly because of the context window that these models can handle. So I have seen prompts at this point that span over like 10,000 words, 20,000 words, and much more, right? And these are the system prompt itself, because you will have like 100 tools with their description embedded within the system prompt, such that these different agents can call out different tools as and when required. But what you don't realize is that you're burning a lot of tokens, because it is the same system prompt that goes in every time. And that takes up a lot of your token space, and also adds a lot of latency, because as the higher number of output tokens or input tokens, the latency can be very much impacted by how many tokens your one LLM calls is consuming. And because of all of this, you will very easily start hitting the rate limit, because there are restrictions on how many tokens per minute are available via different providers. To simplify all of this, a gateway becomes very useful that helps you uh, bring all of this in a unified space where you can have like a in a unified format you can get responses from different providers, different LLMs, right? But what the current gateways are missing is that they do not provide a holistic experience. Now, most of the gateways do not have a very strong guardrailing system in place where they can intercept the user queries that are coming in or the information that is going out from the LLMs itself, because that becomes very crucial. As we saw that the number one attack that is possible is a prompt injection attack, and it is very easy for the attacker to get out a lot of personal information from your agentic applications. Secondly, a lot of these gateways are also missing intelligent routing. It'll have like a very static sort of routing where, three attempts are made for this particular model, and then it keeps going to the next model until like your maximum attempts are over, right? But there can be a lot of, different load balancing techniques as well that can be used for routing your different LLM calls. You can have it based on speed, you can have it based on complexity of the query. Thirdly, you need to have like a real-time cost enforcement, because as you're experimenting, as you're building, you also need to get a constant visualization and understanding of how these different providers or models are going to cost your application, right? Because that becomes very important when deciding how to price a certain feature for your end customer. So you need to have a clear understanding between how different teams are using your different LLMs and how is it being useful in the particular feature that you're trying to build. And finally, I think we have also covered this in our previous webinars as well, that tracing is very important with agentic application. You should get a complete trace of the different LLM calls that are happening, what was going in and what was coming out of each of these different agents and LLMs. Karthik, do you want to add anything until so far?
Yeah, sure. Actually, this is one of my favorite slides that we were when we were building. So earlier, like I said, right, it's an infrastructure level problem here. So this is what the gateway essentially is. It's the infrastructure for your LLM applications and agents. So think of it like this, like when we talk about infrastructure, something like, let's say, your PgBouncer, where you connect your application with your database, or let's say NGINX, which does the routing, load balancing, and etc. Right? So this is what the gateway essentially is, with some more features like guardrailing aspect, because in the end you can actually exploit your LLM applications very easily. This is one of the biggest risk in today's world. uh, I think Claude Mythos is one of the testament for to this problem, if you know how the claims have been going on. And lastly, the tracing aspect. So one of the pain points that I have faced with the developers is that the implementation of the tracing itself can be a bit painful, because they used to first build first, then question later, right? So in the end, when they choose to implement tracing, they won't be having the idea where they have to implement their manual tracing aspects, and let's say some auto instrumenters. So if we ship a tracing feature along with the gateway, it solves the problem essentially, and we have an holistic solution for to this problem.
So, with this in mind, we built Command Center. We actually included a lot of the problems that we were facing as developers while building out a system for AI developers. There are a lot of problems that we face in general in day to day of our development, and we took a lot of care in building certain very intricate things that a lot of these gateways are missing currently. So of course we have like inbuilt guardrailing available in place that provides sub 100 milliseconds of latency. We have built an internal layer for caching as well. So nowadays these different LLMs are do their personal caching of certain prompt sections. But even before it reaches that part, we are doing certain caching because that helps us save a lot of time and that makes it much faster for your LLM applications as well. And we have a lot of other features that I'm sure when we do a walkthrough of the platform that you'll come to appreciate. So before getting into the features, I want Karthik to share a little bit more about the architecture of how we build Command Center so that it gives you a bit more idea of like the thought process that we followed when we were building out a certain feature.
Sure, happy to showcase the architecture. Just give me a second, I'll share my screen. Uh, right. Screen is visible, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, So this is what essentially our architecture will look like. It's a bit big, to be honest, since it's a very big thing, honestly. Uh, so I'll start with how you can interact with the whole gateway layer. You can use our own SDKs that we have built from the scratch that can connect with your gateway layer. Otherwise, we provide an OpenAI endpoint basically, which will act in any kind of SDK, whether it's LiteLLM, OpenAI, or even simple curl commands can work if you are familiar with OpenAI APIs. Since that is the industry standard, uh, it is very easy drop in for you. You just have to change the base URL and the API key of the command center. So this is how your interaction happens in the application layer itself. Now, inside the infrastructure level, if you see, there will be a lot of components here. First one is the security gate. Like after you set up the guardrailing, right? You can set all kinds of guardrailing, whether it's enterprise guardrails or even the rule-based guardrailings can be done here. And second feature is the airbag. Since there are IT guys in the company, right? The people who manage the keys. So this is one another responsibility for them where they can configure the keys per developer team based on their use cases. After that, we hit the caching layer, basically what Rishav said, right? So there are two, three levels of caching done in our gateway layer. First is the your average caching that basically caches your normal prompts in the memory itself. But let's say you want it to be stored in the DB because there can be some queries that can be repeated by other users also. So the which will yield the same results. So you can basically save a lot of tokens on that. And second, we have a L2 level, which is called semantic caching. So again, queries can have semantic similarity, right? So we can do a vector similarity search. Based on that, we can actually match with the output tokens and send it to the application layer.
Karthik, can you zoom in a little bit into the node that you're explaining?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, much better.
So if you hit the cache, it will be a $0 cost and actually a millisecond latency, like let's say 20 to 30 milliseconds. And it supports all kinds of memories, even S3 and GCS storage is also. But let's say if you miss, it will directly call to the provider and yield the result. So this is a bit different from the KV caching that your providers allow uh, because they have their own internal caching systems. But here, what we are doing is we are just caching the input tokens such and match with the output tokens for repeated answers. This for my developer friends, this can help in the tool calling aspect also because that is the deterministic part where you don't need a LLM call itself. You know what kind of tool call can be done. Like let's say user ask what's my name, then you just do a tool call of the name part and yield the result. You have the output already, so you don't have to waste $0.5, $0.4 for that. Now comes the phase three part, which is the actual part of business folks will love. Like, for example, the budget control, because the cost is something that everybody wants to take care of, whether it's a developer, whether it is from the business, or even the administration. Because, as you know, when you work with the harnesses, work with the application layer, the cost just sky shoots, right? If the proper caching is not being done, or if you don't know like what kind of models you are using, even the experiment itself, you are just wasting hundreds of dollars just by one two experiments. So you can like set some kind of budgets here, some kind of, let's say, RBAC control can be given, like only this team is allowed to have this much of budget. Or you can also throttle the rate limit so that you don't abuse the limits, right? Otherwise, your org might get flagged by these model providers, which is not a good thing, of course. Now come the safety part, which is the guardrails that we have configured. So sometimes it will reject the result request and just send the block. If you have, let's say, configured the warning aspect, or let's say just a pass, just log it up, then that can be also allowed. But let's say it passes, then you can check the tool policy. There can be validations done, like if the JSON schema that has come to your application layer, is it proper or not? So if I show you, right, there are other external systems that can be connected to our gateway layer. For example, it's Redis, a vector DB like VV8, Pinecone, a Milvus, object storage for your bigger prompts chat history. Then there's control plane, right? And of course, the hotel collector is also there, so you don't have to rely on the application layer aspect of the observability. And secrets are also there. I think the last is the model router aspect. So this is the interesting part, the part where devs will find it easy, like they don't have to implement the fallbacks, the chains, such that, like, let's say a model fails. Yesterday Gemini failed and you just reverted to Claude. That can all be handled by the gateway itself. So think of it like as NGINX or Cloudflare. And of course, you can have provider checks also. So some model providers recently are not performing properly. They have a lot of downtime use. So you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night and change your provider, of course, when you are connected with our gateway. So this is what our response pipeline will look like, and you can shape it however you want. Let's say you have a cache store, you can just check that. Cost tracking can be done also. Let's say you have your own custom infrastructure built for cost tracking, that can be done. Logging aspect is also solved. Alerting, and let's say you have some kind of webhooks installed to send the data to flash it to some other services, that can be also done. And all of this is HIPAA compliant, SOC2 compliant. So I guess this is what our entire gateway infrastructure is. And we support all kinds of providers, whether is it OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, even your self-hosted LLMs like Llama, and some custom providers like Bedrock and Vertex AI. So I hope this was very simple to explain and very interesting to explain, because uh, this is very beneficial when
So
you
if
get
you
into self-hosting aspect. Yes, Rishabh.
see that the routing aspect is one of the last thing we talked about. So we took a lot of care in building the infrastructure around it because routing is much simpler, but with caching, guardrailing, budget controls, role-based access control is where we have put a lot of focus on. So for enterprises who are getting a lot of traffic on their LLM applications day in and day out, they do not face a lot of hassle when trying to build out their application or trying to serve their customers.
Like code-wise, it just solves. You don't have to put 10 if-else statements. Like if this failed, then do this, etc. Right.
So before we proceed, we'll take a few questions from the chat. Yash is asking, most of the time guardrails use LLM as well to evaluate. What are your thoughts on such cases? So yeah, there are a few guardrail based specific LLMs that have been built out. It depends on your use case. So if you want to do a first level of check, I would say that there are certain rule based checks are possible as well. If you want to match for personally identifiable information, there are a lot of rule based checks, but as your cases get more complex, you might want to use like a better guardrailing system. Sometimes these are LLM based, but I would suggest there are like specific models that you can, self-host for these particular purposes. Maybe look into those if your, data, or check that these LLMs that are hosted somewhere else, they follow necessary compliances. Emily is asking if we are in a regulated environment and need to self-host. Uh, What does the deployment actually look like? Is it a container we run, a Helm chart, or something else? Karthik, can you take that?
So yeah, it is a totally like containerized environment. Basically, you just have to do Docker compose up and the gateway layer is solved. And you can just connect it with your config files and the whole solution is done actually. You can deploy it in your Helm chart, of course, if you want as a worker.
So Joe is asking, does that mean I can't mix and match my guardrails? Can I plug in my guardrails to your gateway? Yes, you can mix and match as many guardrails as you want. We'll head over to platform in just a bit, and I'll show you that we have integrations available for all the popular guardrailing systems that are out there, and you can use any of those and multiple of those as well. And we've been getting a lot of questions whether this session is recorded and will be shared. So yes, this session will be shared once it's over. Okay, now let's proceed to the demo part. Uh,
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen.
I've set up a very simple demo for you to understand how can we use the command center and how the gateway works. So this is a simple chatbot. I am using NanoBot for this, which is an open source agentic system that's available. It's ultra lightweight, so and the responses are quite quick with it. Let me see if it is still up. Let me just send a hi. So it's running, and this is a simple chatbot interface. It replies with hello, how can I help you today?
Rishav, are you sharing the screen or
Uh, yes, is it not visible?
not to me? That's why I was.
Let me just check again. Okay, so I think it's visible. Uh,
Okay.
I'll proceed. Cool. So let me just ask it, what can you do for me? So it comes up with a few things that it can do. For example, answer technical questions, summarize articles, manage files, interacting with GitHub. Let me ask it, what are black holes? Right, so it's a simple chatbot system, like any other, where it can do a few particular tasks for you. And the way a typical developer would do this would have like a LLM that's going on in the background with a few tool calls. So let's just see what is happening over here. We have log of all the messages. There is this very long system prompt that goes in. So it'll have like specific information that I stay a friendly and curious. I'd rather ask a good question than guess wrong. And then it'll have all the information about how it needs to respond. So can try installing with apt, summarize the answer, summarize the transcript, and then it'll have all the tool call information as well. So it can take all the skills from skill.md and other such places, right? And then come up with the answer for the user. So you can have any model plugged into it. Here, like they had options for different providers available. I have plugged in the gateway over here, and the way you do it is very simple. You just put in the base URL along with the key that you will get from the platform. Now we'll head over to the platform and see how all of this is configured. This is the future AGI platform, and this is the gateway section particularly. What you do over here is add a provider. Now you have all the providers available. You can choose one of them and just enter your provider API key. Here I'll enter something, and it is auto validated. And because I entered a wrong API key, it is unable to fetch the models over here. But if I enter the right API key, all the models will be fetched automatically, and then you can choose which models do you want to enable. So I've set up two providers over here, OpenAI and Google, and I've enabled all the possible models that were out there. right? So now, like with the base URL that I showed and with the API key, one unified API key, I can access all these different models and different providers, and I can keep adding much more over here. So I'd sent in a few requests that we just saw, and you can see that all of these requests have already started coming in over here. So these are the requests that I had just made. If you go to the request section, you will see that all the calls that it had to make, and then it came up with the final answer that I can help you with a wide range of tasks, summarizing that we just saw on the chat screen, right? Now let's see in provider, you can get the provider config. If at a later point you want to disable certain models, you can directly do them from here. You can also choose to like change the API format to something of your choice so that all of that is unified for you. Now let's look at something interesting, that is the routing part. Now you want to route your request to different providers. For that, we have a few strategies built in. Default is round robin, but if, for example, you want 70% of your requests to go to OpenAI, you can do a weighted strategy where you choose a weight based on which the requests are routed. Or if you want to respond to your user with the least latency, you can choose that as a routing strategy as well. These are some of the basic configurations, but if you go to the advanced configuration, there are a lot more things available over here. Let's look at the fallback chain. Now, for the chatbot that I just demoed, I was using GPT 4.1. If that is your primary model that you are using, the fallback chain would look something like this, that if that is the model primary, it goes to if that fails, it goes to fallback one, that is GPT 5.4 mini, right? And you can keep adding the second fallback and as many as you want over here, and you can keep making fallback chains. So if you're using a different model as a primary model, suppose you're using Gemini 2.5 Flash, you add that and you have like a different chain for it. So if you're building out multiple applications and they have all different agents and they have like different primary models, you can keep adding different fallback chains depending on the models that you're using. Then we have complexity routing. This is very interesting. So if all your user queries need not go through the best model, a very simple query like how do I change my password does not need to go through Gemini 2.5 Pro. So based on the complexity of your user query, you can enable this and you can add the number of tokens or the vocabulary, and based on that, the routing can happen to different models, right? And then we have the fastest response. So each query goes into like multiple providers and LLMs, and the fastest response that comes in goes out to the user. Similarly, we have different options available. A lot more, intricate details are available here for you to set up if you want that level of control. So you can schedule certain completions. So this is very useful for batch completions where a lot of these requests can have happen at a later time, because for certain complex tasks the user is not interacting or waiting for a live answer, so they can just submit in their request and you can do a scheduled completion for that, right? And there is this thing like circuit breaker, which I find very interesting because you do not want to go into an endless loop of falling back or keep trying different providers and different models. So you can have a circuit breaker to automatically stop at certain point because it has figured out that certain other thing is failing in your LLM application. Right. Then we have the cache layer. Karthik is going to go more in depth when he shows you a certain demo. But this is where we are, storing certain parts of your prompt or fetching the answers for the user at a very high speed, such that, you save a lot of cost on your tokens and also save on latency as well. Now let's try something interesting. I'm going to now turn on the PII detector and let's see if the bot that is live is able to now, catch for these things. This is a guardrail that I've just switched on the, platform. And let me write something is, my name is Rishav. My DOB is 696. Password is so I just switched on the PII detector, and you can see that it could detect the DOB and other entities in the user query itself, and it could immediately block it. Now let's see what is happening over here. So if you go to the logs, you will see that this request was just blocked, and it will lead you to the request that just got blocked, and you can see what is happening over there. Right. So if you come to the request logs, you see that this request has come in, but this was, protected by the guardrailing system, and you will see that guardrail was triggered over here. Let's go back to the guardrailing system. Here you have all the rules. So I think somebody had asked if you could use multiple guardrails. So of course we have the future AGI protect models also integrated over here. And we had published research on how our guardrailing models are one of the best out there in terms of latency and detection. But we have also added integrations for all the popular guardrailing systems that are out there, such as Llama Guard, Azure Content Safety, and many others. Apart from this, you also have the rule-based checks, such as PII detection, because these are certain patterns that can, can be detected without sending these things to an ML model, and that becomes much faster for you to use. So there are certain rule-based checks as well, so you can enable multiple of these as per your requirement. So I'll pause here, and maybe Karthik, you want to like go over certain other sections of this feature.
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen. So I have got some two, three demos which I can show.
I think we'll have time for one maybe.
Okay, let's see. I hope screen is visible, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, before starting up, I'll just say I think this interface is familiar with lot of developers these days. It's very hot, like it's called OpenCode. It's like Cloud Code, basically an open source alternative and agent harness for your coding needs, right? And it has a lot of great features, like you can just switch any kind of model from any provider. But again, the pain comes, right, where you have to like manage multiple keys from multiple providers and like pray which one of them works. So all of that you can just use our gateway and use the single key itself, and you will be able to leverage the models to code and talk to the open code interface. For example, for now I have used GPT 4.1 mini for this. Like I was talking to it, just asking it to explore the code and review it, how's the progress right now. So I've been building a feature basically in the backend. So let's say I'll just ask it to make a mermaid graph of this. So like, can you make a mermaid graph of this? So right, uh, there's a PII in the chat history. Okay, it got blocked. That's why. Just give me a second. I'll turn off the guardrail.
I've switched it off.
Yeah. Okay. So of course it has just done that. And let's say I wanted to change the model. I can just add them. So I have added so many models from the gateway itself, the 5.4, 2.5 Pro, and 3 Pro, etc. So I can just select it here and just be done with it. What how Rishabh showed, right? So it is very easy peasy. Yeah. So if I open the request logs, you'll be able to see. So these were the guardrails that got triggered. Let's say I open the guardrails. These are the guardrails. And if you see, the latency is very low, like 77 millisecond. So it's near microseconds basically. And you'll also have the reason why it got blocked. Similarly, let's say if I say cache hits, right? So this is the interesting aspect of the gateway. When I said that there might be some prompts that might have very similar queries, like let's say I'll just open this one. So some user just asked to my agent, like, what are your pricing plans? Now, this is a very simple task that can be done using RAG, etc. But why do I pay for this, right? I have already answered this question to some other user already. So I can just cache that and generate the responses. So as you can see, the latency is almost like zero. So it is microseconds actually. It's not able to reflect it here because we are showing it in milliseconds. And the cost is also very minimal. So again, the fun aspect is that you can maintain sessions itself. So one thing the other providers like even the Lite LLM doesn't have, and you might need to build is you have to manage sessions for all your users, right? So you can just send an extra header for the sessions where you can just check club all the requests into one session and like check what are the user behaviors, how is your application performing, and you can do better data analysis. You can just see what kind of request you are hitting and what is the highest cost for that. So this will help you to optimize your application itself. Next comes the analytics part. Yeah, we'll show you in all kinds of granular level, like which model is hitting the highest. So I guess here the GPT 4.1 was hitting the highest since I was using it for the open code, right? And based on the models that I have configured in the providers, and let's say I want to just segregate it based on providers, that it can also be done. So right now, OpenAI was the one I was using. And if you look at the tokens, but still, if you see the Google still had to check, like had a lot of tokens. Uh, I can also check the cost part, like there's a cost breakdown for each model and each provider. So I can like basically make decisions based on it, which provider is costing me more or which model is costing me more, and is it giving me better results or not. Same goes with the latencies and even the error rates also. So I hit 403 errors a lot for Gemini models. I think a lot of people have hit that recently, right? I can just, yeah. Um, Same goes with providers also. And I have logs for every model here. Like, let's say I just want to import a table and send it to my business team. I can do it simply here. I don't have to make another Excel sheet and like that problem is solved for me, thankfully. So coming back to the caching part, I'll talk a bit about that. You can configure the cache in the providers list itself, right? If I click on configure cache, you have to enable it manually. So there are multiple options for you. Let's say we also provide CDN for that. So you can enable it from here. Let's say there's a semantic caching you want to be done, like for your RAG based application which will have similar queries on the semantic level itself. So that can be done also. And the backend part, like if you want to keep it in memory. So for memory, we'll give you what is the default TTL for this and how many entries that you want it to be live in the cache. But let's say you want to use something else, something more powerful like Redis or even your local disk storage, then that can be also done. And let's say you want some kind of simple storage like Amazon S3 or GCS or Azure Blob, that can be also done. You just have to pass the settings for it, and even the compress option is there. So we just fetch it, decompress it, and give the answers. So this is the a cost efficient method in which you can just save a lot of cost is what I believe. Instead of relying on the providers that will cache prompts for you, the gateway itself can cache it. And all of this, if you see, there's a 11.6% cache hit rate in my request. So I'll just share what kind of caching was there. So I was playing around with some other harnesses like OpenClaw, uh, like what is WebAssembly in one sentence, just give me the response, and I have that. Even in the AP, let's say I want it as in the logs also, like the cache was hit or not, we give you the response header there, which will tell you the cache hit was there or not. So the status is the hit exact as you can see here. So this is what the analytics and request logs are. But let's say you want your LLM calls to be continuously monitored, like let's say error rate is suddenly spiking up, or let's say your cost and or latency is spiking up. Like some devs work in a very low latency environment, or some devs care about that they don't want to hit a lot of cost. These days I have been seeing like people who use code editors like Claude Code or OpenCode, they care a lot about cost itself. So gateway is something that can help you create rules, add channels for it, like what kind of rules you want, and some kind of threshold. So what can do you want it to be blocked, warning, or you just want the bot to ping you in Slack that you are hitting cost, stop whatever you are doing, right? So all kind of monitoring can be done. And again, for all kind of your sessions are consolidated here itself, so you can just monitor the current users experience, or even what your application layer experiences. Next is one of the aspect from the monitoring itself. It's the budget part. This is something the administration would prefer, is what I believe. Like, let's say the guys who manage multiple teams, even in the AI aspect itself, like someone who is into designing infrastructure, someone who is building agents, etc. So they just they can't give a single key to everyone and think that everyone will be using it optimizing it properly, right? So they can just set budgets per key and give controls to everyone in the model level itself. So let's say someone who is building agents might need a best intelligent model, right? But someone who is just working on guardrailing aspect, or the let's say some kind of parsing aspect, they don't need those. Like they only need lightweight models like Gemini Flash or GPT-5 Mini, etc. So that can be done using budgets, and even roles and access can be configured. And all of this you can see in the settings itself, like how does it work, etc. As how Rishav said, right? You can create API keys, you can revoke them. So you don't have to shuffle your provider API keys also. So I guess this is what all the gateway is about. I hope you guys liked it and would try it out.
Yeah, I think we have a lot more cool features, but we should leave that to exploration.
Yeah.
So we have covered like some of the most important features which we have felt that developers or anyone who is building out with, LLMs will come to appreciate and it will make their life easier. And there are some of the other features as well where you can connect your MCP tools and see which tools are being called in a particular LLM call, and all of that data also starts flowing in on the dashboard directly. So with that, I'll just share a conclusion slide and we'll open the floor for some questions. So before your next deployment, I want the developers to think about where is the PII interception happening? Is it happening before the request goes into the LLM and then it might already be too late? So you want a guardrailing system to be in place that works very much in tandem with your agentic applications. What are your failover strategies? So you don't want to like see that if a particular provider is failing, you want to have like a different provider over there. Have you been able to like enforce budget caps on different teams? And trust me on this, like I have personally faced problems because I have had questions come to me that why is the OpenAI bill so high? And I have to tell that we have been experimenting because we are trying to integrate certain OpenAI models on our platform for to enable the users to run certain prompts, but the different teams are building out different demos and then you can't track who is bringing in this cost, right? uh, can you produce an audit log for that for any LLM call in, that happened in just within 5 minutes? And is your routing intelligent or is it hard coded? Like, are you still trying to have like a for loop where the calls go 3 times sequentially and then it switches to a different provider? If these are the problems that you are facing, these are certain infrastructural problems around, how you're building out your LLM application, and it need not be so rudimentary in nature. There are interesting mechanisms that are in place now, and I would encourage you to try out the command center gateway for that. So to the engineers, I am making a humble request that, go to your dev endpoint and just make a small change. Try out the command center gateway, and I'm sure you're going to thank me later. For the security officers, please do ask in your next meeting that how are your engineers auditing the requests that are coming into your LLM application, because if they do not have like guardrailing systems in place, your application is open to a lot of threats. And for the product managers, if you can, pull up the last 30 days of data of your LLM spend by team, feature, and model, that's good. But if not, there is a gap and you want to understand where things are being routed. So our session has been recorded and it's going to be available post the webinar. It will be emailed to you, and please join our Discord community, because all the resources about the open source repos, we are very soon going to make some more repos open source, and all the links are going to be posted over there. So please do join the Discord community. We have an active, community of developers and other people building out with LLMs over there. So I'm sure you are going to find something interesting over there as well. Before closing, we'll take a few questions. There are some questions in the chat. So Yash is asking, we run experiments where we are comparing two different prompts on live traffic. Can the gateway help with that, or does that have to happen at application layer? Karthik, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, Gateway can indeed help with that. Basically, you can just compare the prompts and get into results. But honestly speaking, future AGI platform itself has the features which you want to achieve, like the experimentation part can be done in the platform itself, and even the prototyping part, which we have talked in our previous webinars.
Karthik, another question for you. Joe is asking, how do you ensure user isolation with caching enabled?
So, in the request headers, we can actually send the custom headers where you want to hit the cache or not. So that even with the response headers also, so you can get the idea where if the cache is going to hit or not.
And we do like a lot of clustering. So if there are like simpler questions, like the one that Karthik had shown, that, how to reset your password or what is something, these are certain redundant questions. So these are cached differently. But if something requires like user specific information, we do not really cache that information. Uh, Bam is asking, can we self-host it in Azure or AWS? How router provider works, as that also requires agent level changes to support different models, right?
So yeah, you can indeed host it on any kind of hyperscaler you want, which supports Dockerized environments, containerized environments. Even if you have Kubernetes, it's possible. Microservices architecture.
Follow-up question is, can we also do rate limits in this one? Yes, you can set your personal rate limits within the platform. Uh, are there APIs available to automate these configs like a playbook when we onboard applications?
Yeah, we have our own SDKs. You can use the OpenAI APIs itself if you want. We'll be sharing some more cookbooks and videos so that you can get onboarded with the gateway soon. You know.
Joe is asking, can it return more info to the client about why it was blocked or informative error messages and handling? So yes, you can configure that. So in our case as well, we saw that it shows that PII has been detected. But if you're using like the more intelligent models, they also like return certain responses, and that is returned to you in the API. If you want to display that to the user, you can go ahead and Bhardwaj is asking, is there a way of evaluating different model responses in the system? For example, the quality of responses vary from one provider to the other. We have to do a manual check. How can we automate it? Karthik, do you want?
Sure. Like the better way would be to integrating evaluation framework that we also provide, such that you can have an objective metric for your success criterias of your agents, basically.
Yeah. Can the saved sessions also be used for long-term persistence and retrieval, or is it primarily for observability and evals?
Yeah, it can. We can save the sessions. If you are asking about the caching is aspect also, so as I showed, we support the simple storage applications, right? So which you can utilize for caching.
We have got three teams using different frameworks, one on LangChain, one on Crew AI, one on OpenAI. Can they all point at the same gateway endpoint? Yes, you can also like have them on different sessions and have them on different budget caps, and uh, yeah, you can enable that for your users. So, Rohit is asking, how do you understand the similarity of the question intent? Are you using a local model to interpret the meaning there? So, we are using like certain clustering methods to understand the question and the intent. And based on that, we determine if the questions are similar and they can go to like a cluster. Based on that, we cache if we have to do that. So how can I access pricing to use this? The pricing is available on our website, and we can also like help you with the pricing via certain links on Discord. Um, how is it? How it's difference? For example, if we are using Azure AI Foundry.
So it basically Azure AI Foundry is one of the hyperscalers and providers that gives you the access to the models hosted on their infrastructure. So think gateway as a router instead of a hosting environment. So it's to eliminate the dependencies on such services basically.
I think we have covered most of it and we are about time. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I hope this was useful for you and you are able to leverage our gateway for your Gen AI applications. Thank you.
Thank you.